How do you forgive the people who stole your future and convinced you it was your fault? My name is Lizzie and this is my story. I didn't find out until my 26th birthday, in front of everyone, when my grandfather asked a single question that detonated 26 years of lies. What happened next didn't just destroy my family. It exposed something far worse. They'd planned it from the beginning and I had proof. You are welcome to Mila Studio, where we bring real-life scenarios to life. Hit the like button and subscribe so you won't miss any of our mind-blowing family revenge stories. Let's get started. They taught me I was bad with money while buying vacation homes with mine. The birthday cake arrived with 26 candles, one for each year I'd failed to become the person I was supposed to be. My mother had chosen it, of course. Vanilla with buttercream roses, the kind I'd stopped liking at 14 but never corrected her about. That felt like the story of my life. Swallowing truths to keep the peace. Make a wish, sweetheart, Dad said. Phone already out to photograph the moment for their social media. Behind him, our dining room gleamed. The chandelier they'd installed last spring, the marble table from Italy, the original artwork that cost more than my annual rent. I wished for the dinner to end quickly. My grandfather sat to my right, his weathered hand warm on my shoulder. He'd driven 3 hours to be here. The only person at this table who'd noticed I was wearing the same blouse from last year's birthday. The only one who'd slipped 2 20s into my palm when we hugged, whispering, "For something special." Speech. Speech. My aunt called out, wine-happy and oblivious. I forced a smile. I'm just grateful to have family. Wait, Grandpa interrupted, his voice carrying that particular clarity that comes before terrible things. Before we do cake, I have to know something, Lizzie girl. His eyes crinkled with pride. You're 26 now. That trust fund I set up when you were born, it's been accessible since you were 21. 5 full years. He squeezed my shoulder. I've been dying to know. What did you do with it? Grad school? Investment property? Your mother always said you were being responsible, keeping it quiet. But I want to hear it from you. The room crystallized into silence. My mother's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. My father's camera lowered slowly. Every face turned toward me, and I felt the weight of all their expectations, all their carefully constructed stories about my life. My voice came out as a whisper, but in that frozen moment it might as well have been a scream. What trust fund? My grandfather's smile faltered. The $4 million trust fund, sweetheart. The one your parents have been managing for you. The birthday candles flickered between us like tiny funeral pyres, melting into the cake nobody would eat. What would you have done in his place? Time became elastic. I watched my mother's hand tremble as she set down her wine glass. The base clinked against marble 3 times. Tiny damning percussion that filled the silence. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping backward, and the sound felt like bone on concrete. Dad, let's not do this now, my mother said, her voice bright and brittle. It's Lizzie's birthday. Do what? Grandpa's confusion was giving way to something harder. Answer a simple question about money I put aside for my granddaughter? For $1 million. The number kept reshaping itself in my mind, too large to hold. I thought of last winter, calling my mother in tears because my heat had been shut off. How she'd sighed, that particular sigh that meant here we go again, and asked why I couldn't manage money like a normal person. I'd believed her. Standing in my freezing apartment, I believed I was the problem. There were complications, Dad said carefully, looking at everyone except me. Legal complications with the trust structure. We were protecting. I never got it. My voice came from somewhere deep and foreign. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. I counted on my fingers like a child. 5 years you watched me work 2 jobs. 3 jobs last spring. My aunt's face had gone pale. My uncle studied his plate. The cousins shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by their phones. Sweetheart, you're misunderstanding. My mother started. Where is it? Grandpa's hand left my shoulder. His chair scraped back. Where's Lizzie's money? The chandelier above us, I could suddenly calculate its cost. $6,000. I knew because I'd helped my mother pick it out online, listening to her debate between 2 options while I ate ramen for the 4th night in a row. My electricity bill overdue by 30 days. We can explain everything, Mom said, reaching for me. Her wrist caught the light. The bracelet was new. Diamonds. I pulled away and tasted something copper in my mouth. I'd bitten my cheek without realizing. The pain felt clarifying, real, the only honest thing in this room. How long have I been eating scraps from a table you bought with my inheritance? Nobody answered. The candles had burned down to waxy stumps, smoke curling upward like prayers that would never be answered. Should she stop or finish what she started? I left without the cake. My studio apartment had never felt smaller. 400 square feet that cost half my income. The radiator that clanked like a dying animal. The water stain on the ceiling shaped like a continent I'd never afford to visit. I sat on my thrift store couch and stared at the wall until sunrise painted it gray. My phone vibrated with messages I didn't read. 43 missed calls by Monday morning. My mother's text scrolled past in a desperate stream. We need to talk. You're overreacting. There's context you don't understand. Dad's having chest pains, Lizzie. Is that what you want? I wanted to understand how they'd done it. The law library downtown smelled like old paper and broken promises. I spent 3 days there, learning words like fiduciary duty, and breach of trust and embezzlement. The librarian started recognizing me, sliding books across the desk with sympathetic eyes that made me want to scream. At night, memories I'd buried resurfaced with surgical precision. Age 17, Mom explaining I wouldn't qualify for financial aid because of Grandpa's provisions. So community college made more sense. Her hand on my shoulder, so concerned. We'll help however we can, sweetie. Age 23. Dad asking if I'd considered a more practical career, while standing in his renovated kitchen. The countertops were Italian marble. He told me they were on sale. Age 25. Family vacation photos on Facebook. Bali, Greece, Morocco. I'd worked overtime that Christmas to afford my mother's gift. She'd opened it at dinner, smiled vaguely, set it aside. I'd found it months later, still wrapped in their donation pile. Every memory recalibrated itself into evidence. On the fourth night, I called a lawyer whose website promised trust litigation, free consultation. Her voice on the phone was professional, careful. Do you have documentation? Proof the trust existed. My grandfather. We'll need paper. Bank statements. Trust documents. Without evidence, it's just family drama. I hung up and stared at my grandfather's number. We hadn't spoken since the birthday dinner. He tried calling, but I couldn't bear hearing his apologies, his shock, his unintentional complicity in my erasure. But he had the documents. My thumb hovered over his name. Outside, a siren wailed past. Someone else's emergency, someone else's reckoning. I pressed call. Lizzie girl. He answered on the first ring. Tell me what you need. The forensic accountant's name was Diana Chan, and she had the emotional range of a surgical knife, which was exactly what I needed. This won't be pleasant, she said at our first meeting, sliding a retainer agreement across her desk. The number made my stomach drop, but Grandpa had already written the check. Financial betrayal leaves a trail. We're going to follow every dollar. The trail led exactly where I knew it would. Trust disbursement. $47,000, March 2019. My mother's Instagram from that same week. Finally splurging on our dream kitchen renovation. Hashtag blessed, hashtag worth the wait. Trust disbursement. $63,000, June 2020. My father's Facebook. Celebrating 30 years of marriage in Santorini. Life is beautiful. Trust disbursement. $28,000, November 2021. The month I'd called them sobbing because my car died and I couldn't afford the repairs. Mom had offered to lend me $300. But you really need to budget better, honey. Diana's spreadsheet grew like a cancer, color-coded and damning. Every vacation, every luxury car lease, every investment property, and club membership and charity gala ticket. My entire 20s itemized and stolen. They were smart, Diana said, not quite impressed. Kept individual withdrawals under $50,000 to avoid court authorization requirements. Spread them across years. Called them trust management expenses and educational distributions. I never went to their kind of schools. No, you didn't. I started driving past their house at odd hours, watching lights turn on and off. I wasn't planning anything. I just needed to see it. The house that my money had protected. The driveway where cars I'd financed sat gleaming. The garden my inheritance had landscaped. My mother spotted me once Tuesday evening. She came outside in her silk robe, $400 I'd learned to estimate, and stood at the curb. We stared at each other across the width of their manicured lawn. She opened her mouth, closed it, went back inside. The next morning their lawyer sent a letter. Concerns about harassment. Misunderstandings about complex financial instruments. Willingness to meet and discuss. Diana read it and smiled for the first time since we'd met. They're scared. Scared people make mistakes. What do we do now? She pulled out a fresh folder, thick with subpoenas waiting to be filed. Now? We make them more scared. I signed my name 23 times, each signature feeling like a small sharp blade. The bank records arrived in 3 cardboard boxes. Diana spread them across her conference table like an autopsy, each statement a cross-section of systematic theft. But it was the 4th box, the one from Grandpa's attorney, that changed everything. These are the original trust documents, she said, holding up yellowed papers dated 1999. Standard irrevocable trust. Your grandfather as grantor, your parents as trustees until you turn 21, then full control transfers to you. She paused. But look at this. Amendment dated 2006. I would have been 7. Your mother went to your grandfather with concerns. Said you were showing signs of financial irresponsibility. At 7 years old. Convinced him to modify the terms, extending their trusteeship to age 25, with discretionary distribution authority. I remember being 7. I'd stolen a candy bar from a grocery store because the older kids dared me. Mom had made it into a referendum on my character for months. There's more. Diana's finger traced down another document. 2012, another amendment. They told your grandfather you'd gotten into serious trouble. Didn't specify what, and needed structured guidance. Extended their control to age 30. That's 4 more years, Lizzie. For more years they plan to keep access. I was 13 in 2012. I'd been caught passing notes in class. They engineered this. My voice sounded distant. For decades. Look at the withdrawal patterns. Diana overlaid 2 timelines. Every time they made a large disbursement, within weeks they'd visit your grandfather with some story about your struggles. Kept him worried. Kept him compliant. Kept the money flowing. My phone buzzed. Mom, your grandfather is elderly and confused. Please don't let strangers manipulate him against his own family. The audacity was almost beautiful. There's something else, Diana said quietly. She pulled out a final document, a letter from 2020, my grandfather to the trust attorney. He asked about distribution timelines. Wanted to make sure you were getting support during the pandemic. The response marked handled via phone call with trustees. Assured him I was receiving appropriate funds and doing well. I'd been evicted that summer. Slept on a friend's couch for 3 months while my parents posted photos from Cape Cod. They didn't just steal from you, Diana said. They stole you. The person you could have been. The life you should have lived. I stared at the documents until the numbers blurred into rage. When can we file? Tomorrow morning. Courthouse opens at 9. Grandpa's kitchen smelled like coffee and regret. I should have asked you directly, he said for the dozenth time, hands wrapped around his mug. All those years. I should have asked you. They were convincing. I sat across from him at the table where I'd eaten countless childhood breakfasts, back when I still believed my family was safe. I kept detailed records. He slid a leather journal toward me. Every conversation with your parents about the trust. Dates, amounts discussed, their exact words. His hand shook slightly. Started keeping it after the 2012 amendment. Something felt wrong, but they're my daughter and son-in-law. I wanted to trust them. The journal was meticulous. March 3, 2015. Sarah called, says Lizzie dropped out again, needs structure. Requested $35,000 for educational intervention. Note. Lizzie sounded fine when I called her for her birthday? You doubted them. I doubted myself more. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. They're very good at making you question reality. Yeah. I knew that magic trick intimately. We sat in silence, listening to his ancient refrigerator hum. Finally he spoke. Your grandmother, before she passed, she made me promise something. Make sure Lizzie gets to choose her own life. That's why I made the trust. His eyes were wet. I failed her. I failed you. You're here now. My throat tightened. That's more than they ever were. He reached across the table, squeezed my hand. I'll testify. Every conversation, every manipulation, every lie. I'll tell it all. It'll destroy your relationship with Mom. She destroyed it herself. His voice hardened with a grief that mirrored mine. 26 years ago, when she decided her comfort mattered more than her daughter's future. The coffee had gone cold, but neither of us moved. Sometimes surviving starts with finding one person who believes your truth. Diana's office. 3 weeks before trial. They're offering a settlement, she said, sliding papers across her desk. Full restitution of remaining trust principal. Approximately $340,000, plus $200,000 in damages. Total, $540,000. I stared at the number. Life-changing money. Grad school. A real apartment. Security I'd never known. What's the catch? Non-disclosure agreement. No public record. You sign a statement saying this was a misunderstanding about trust administration. They admit no wrongdoing. She paused. And you agree to family reconciliation counseling. The words tasted like ash. They stole $4 million. This is barely. The rest is gone, Lizzie. Spent. We can win in court, but you can't squeeze blood from stone. Diana's voice softened in a way that frightened me. I have to advise you, trials are expensive, public, brutal. Your parents will argue you're vindictive, mentally unstable. They'll drag up every mistake you ever made. And even if you win, collection could take years. My phone lit up. A text from my aunt. Your mother's in the hospital. Stress-induced heart episode. Please, Lizzie. She's still your mom. Take the weekend, Diana said. Think about what you really want. That Saturday, I sat in my car outside my parents' house. My mother's new SUV gleamed in the driveway, the one she'd bought last month. $60,000 easily, while offering me $540,000 like it was a generous gift. A neighbor waved at me, confused. Mrs. Peterson, who'd always complimented my parents on their beautiful home and generous spirit. What would she think, knowing the foundation was built on stolen ground? I thought about the settlement, about silence, about swallowing one more truth to keep the peace. Then I drove to Diana's office and watched her shred the papers. Trial, I said. I want a trial. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Oak paneling, fluorescent lights, the kind of space where lives are quietly dismantled. My parents sat across the aisle with their attorney, a man whose retainer cost more than my annual rent. Mom wore pearls. Dad wore his funeral suit. They looked like victims. Diana presented the evidence methodically. Bank statements projected on a screen, each withdrawal highlighted in red. $2.3 million in 20 years. Vacations, cars, home improvements, investment properties. A lifestyle funded entirely by my future. And what was Ms. Morrison doing during these years? Diana asked. I'd prepared for this. Still, speaking felt like swallowing glass. Working. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I was evicted twice. My heat was shut off one winter. I had $847 in my bank account on my 25th birthday. I looked at my mother. She was staring at her hands. I called them when my car died. My mom lent me $300 and told me I needed to budget better. A sound escaped my mother, half gasp, half sob. Performative or real, I couldn't tell anymore. Grandpa testified next. His voice shook but held. They told me Lizzie was troubled, irresponsible, that releasing funds would enable destructive behavior. I believed them because parents are supposed to protect their children. He looked at my mother. I didn't know protection could look like theft. My father's attorney tried damage control. My clients made judgment calls in their daughter's best interest, perhaps overly cautious. They bought a vacation home in 2018, Diana interrupted, displaying the deed, while their daughter was sleeping on a friend's couch because she couldn't make rent. Which part of that was in her best interest? The judge, a woman in her 60s with iron gray hair, listened without expression. When it was my turn for a victim impact statement, I stood. My hands didn't shake. They didn't just take money. They took every time I apologized for being a failure. Every time I believed I was the problem. Every time I felt small. I looked at them finally. You built your comfort on my shame. And you'd still be doing it if Grandpa hadn't asked one honest question. My mother was crying. Real tears this time, I thought. But not for me, for herself, for what she was about to lose. The judge's gavel fell like thunder. Judgment for the plaintiff. 1 year later. The apartment had a radiator that worked and windows that let in actual light. Not lavish. I'd learned I didn't need lavish. Just mine. Paid for with money a judge had clawed back from my parents' accounts, their retirement funds, the sale of their vacation property. Graduate school started in 3 weeks. Clinical psychology. I wanted to understand how people convince themselves that hurting someone they love is the same as loving them. My phone buzzed. Grandpa. Dinner Sunday? I'm making pot roast. I smiled and typed back a yes. The doorbell rang. A delivery. A small package with no return address. Inside, a birthday card. My mother's handwriting, unmistakable even through the tremor of age or guilt or both. Lizzie, I know you won't read this, but I need you to understand. We never meant to hurt you. We thought we were building something stable, something that would benefit everyone. We lost sight of what mattered. I lost sight of you. I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but it's all I have. The money is being paid as ordered. Your father and I are managing. We're smaller now. Maybe that's what we needed to be all along. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know, I see now what I refused to see then. You deserved better. You deserved everything. Mom. I read it twice. Then placed it in a drawer. Neither thrown away nor displayed. Some truths need to exist without requiring my response. Sunday came. Grandpa's kitchen smelled like rosemary and redemption. We ate pot roast and talked about my classes, his garden, the mundane kindnesses of ordinary life. You hear from them? He asked carefully. Card came. I read it. He nodded, asked nothing more. That was healing too, not having to explain every feeling, justify every boundary. After dinner he brought out a small cake. 27 candles this time. Make a wish. I looked at the flickering flames, remembering another birthday, another cake, the moment everything shattered and rebuilt itself into truth. I didn't wish for revenge, that was behind me now. Didn't wish for reconciliation, that might never come. Instead, I wished for what I'd finally learned I deserved. A future I got to choose. I blew out the candles. The smoke curled upward, carrying away 26 years of someone else's story. Mine was just beginning. Was revenge worth it?